Dr. Andrew Joyner is the associate professor of geosciences at ETSU. He established the Tennessee Climate Office in 2016 and became the official Tennessee State Climatologist in January 2021. He is also the founder and director of the Geoinformatics and Disaster Science lab at ETSU, and he coordinates the GIS, which is the Geographic Information Systems Graduate Certificate Program. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you again for having me. Can you guys hear me and see the screen okay? Okay, good. I'll go ahead and switch to the presentation mode. But yeah, thanks for having me. Like Merritt said, I'm fairly new as the state climatologist. Tennessee, I'm gonna switch over to here. Tennessee, until January of this year, was one of only 2 states in the country without an official state climate office. The Tennessee Climate Office, which was established in 2016, served as the acting state climate office until we became official. And so we have been doing this, we're not new, but we're newly official. And so we're really excited about that. We have an assistant state climatologist here as well. And we actually, me and Will both met with Norma earlier this summer. And so it was great meeting with her and hearing about what you guys do and thinking about what we can provide for you. And so that I wanted to kind of go through a little bit about what we are, what we do, and what we want to do, and provide some examples. And so in general, most people don't know what a state climate office is or what they do, and each state climate office is different, but the idea behind a state climate office and why it's important to have one and what we were missing by not having one in Tennessee is we don't get, without a state climate office, you don't get that local fine resolution information. You don't have somebody kind of in your corner lobbying for you for various things, to get data, to get resources, to get federal grants. Those are the kinds of things that a state climate office can do, providing resources that are catered to local needs. So those are all the things that we're doing, and that is part of what we want to do as well, kind of add to those resources. It's also really unique that we have the state climate office here at ETSU in Johnson City. Most state climate offices are located at the major ag or flagship university, which would typically be UT Knoxville. But for various reasons, we were able to have it here in Northeast Tennessee. And I think that's a major benefit to our region, to basically have the state climate office here in our area, since sometimes people think Tennessee stops in Knoxville. And so I think it's really exciting to have that here. So a little bit about what we do. I'm not going to go over all of these things, but this is a nice infographic I like to use, kind of separating at the top out some of the things that we do at the climate office, whether it's research or climate service needs, or events, and then at the bottom, kind of what we want to do. And I'll go over some of those in a bit as well. I also got our email down there, tnclimate@etsu.edu, and our website. Just if you Google Tennessee Climate Office, it'll be the first thing that comes up. So one of the biggest things we do, and if you are interested in receiving these, we send these out monthly. We have a monthly email list. We don't spam you with 10,000 things a month, usually just 1 or 2 emails a month. But one of those emails is to provide these monthly climate summaries. And these are also available on our website. We have a monthly reports section of our website. And so the 2 biggest things that start the report are looking at what did the previous month look like compared to normal, whatever we call normal, which at the moment we're using data from the 1981 to 2010 data set, but probably within the next month or 2, we'll be able to use the new normals that are 1991 to 2020. And so we provide information about what did our temperature look like compared to that 30-year average, what did our precipitation look like compared to the 30-year average. You can see with the precipitation in July, a lot of our areas of Northeast Tennessee were pretty dry, and so the recent rainfall over the past week really helped in some of those areas. We also provide a lot of other information in those reports, including storm reports, stream flow, drought status, fire potential, and a lot of other kind of event-specific information. We also make comparisons. So in spring 2020, We had it was a very warm late winter, early spring. And we were in parts of Northeast Tennessee, especially, we were a month or even a little bit over a month early with our spring green up. And so we were able to create a map showing where that was occurring. 2020 was also a really wet year. And so several of our counties in Northeast Tennessee had their wettest year on record or second wettest year on record. And these types of things go into our annual report that we also just started doing this past year, and we'll do those every year going forward. So I mentioned drought. We provide this monthly report where we have a summary of everything that happened in the climatologically over the previous month. We also provide weekly feedback and advice to the U.S. Drought Monitor specific to Tennessee. This is probably our most recent major drought event that I'm showing you the maps of here. If you remember, about 2 years ago now, we were going into what's called a flash drought. So you have flash flooding. You also have flash drought. That happens really quick, a rapid onset event of drought conditions. So in late August, early September is when this drought began to creep up from the southern part of Tennessee. And within a couple of weeks, by the first week of October, it was very hot. We were breaking records a whole week there in the 90s here in Northeast Tennessee. I think there's 3 or 4 straight days where we're breaking high temperature records. But we were also in drought. So between the high temperature, increased evaporation, all of this exacerbated our drought conditions. And so we were in pretty severe drought during October. And my 15 seconds of fame, I guess, was the Weather Channel was really interested in how this compared to 2016 and the drought that preceded the Gatlinburg wildfires. And so they called, and we did a short interview with the Weather Channel in 2019, kind of explaining how this was maybe similar and how it was different as well. We certainly didn't see the wildfires from this event that we saw from Gatlinburg. We do summaries of these types of events. I'm not going to go through this, but this is basically a bit of the summary of that specific event and all the kind of climatic factors that were a part of that. We also do a big thing that we do, especially as far as our funding goes. We technically don't have any funding from the state. We're a non-funded office. At the same time, there are certain grants that we have been able to secure mainly through the GADS lab, the Geoinformatics and Disaster Science Lab, and now starting to get some of those grants, hopefully within the next about 6 months, coming through the Tennessee Climate Office. But one of the big things we do is hazard mitigation planning. If you don't know much about hazard mitigation planning, which most people don't, every state and every county is required to have what's called a hazard mitigation plan, where you assess all of your natural risks, which are often a lot of climatic risks, flooding, tornadoes, wildfires, those sorts of things. And so those hazard mitigation plans assess those risks and try to assess the vulnerability to the population to those risks. How many people live in a floodable area? How often does it rain? X inches within an hour, within 24 hours. What is going on in your community? If counties do not have a mitigation plan, then they aren't eligible for certain federal funding after a disaster. And so it's important for our counties to have these mitigation plans. There are 10, I think the last time I checked, counties in Tennessee, they'd either have never had a mitigation plan or have expired plans. So you have to update these every 5 years. And so we look at all kinds of things. This is an example looking at temporal data for drought, how in Sevier County. We actually wrote Sevier County's hazard mitigation plan where Gatlinburg is located. That was approved by FEMA last year. And so this is looking at these different drought events. So you can see down here in 2016, that was a pretty rapid onset event. It wasn't as long-term severe as the drought that occurred in 2007, 2008. But it happened very quickly. We had a number of other factors that led to the outbreak and wildfires. Looking at the percent of time, and then we also can create wildfire models. This is just an example from Sevier County, looking at high, moderate, and low areas for wildfire risk, looking at a variety of factors, some climatic, some topographic, some land cover based. All of those were considered for that type of model. So this is a few other examples from that Sevier County hazard mitigation plan. We look at general climatology. Of course, Sevier County is similar to our area here, where you've got lower elevation areas and higher elevation areas that have quite different climate. And so you can see that in this example here with average annual precipitation with their climate graph. And then this is really interesting to understand what your flood risks are. And so we can look at 1%, 1 hour extreme rainfall estimates. How many inches would we expect for a 1% or 100-year rainfall event? And how many inches of rainfall might we expect from a 24-hour, a 100-year, 1% event? One of the big goals of our climate office is to understand these return periods and also redo or reassess them, because as we have more extreme events and those data points get added to the data set, then maybe what used to be, and we see this all over this country and all over the world, what used to be maybe a 100-year event is now a 25-year event, or even a 10-year event. And so it's really important, especially as we're able to update these mitigation plans and provide data to the state, that we understand our return periods for flooding. Are there certain areas of the state that are becoming more vulnerable to extreme rainfall? You don't know that if you don't have the data to run the statistics and really kind of spatially understand where and when that might be happening. Also, some research here in our department that I do a good bit on is habitat or niche modeling. So several people, including myself, mentioned Roan Mountain as one of their favorite spots. And of course, these are fragile, unique habitats. The spruce fir forest in particular, they're at Roan Mountain, Mount Mitchell, up at White Top. And so you can see in this map here, what we have on the top are projections for climate change impacts in 2050. On the top left side, A is a moderate climate change scenario, and B is an extreme climate change scenario for 2050. On the bottom is 2070 for moderate climate change scenario and an extreme climate change scenario. These are based on the previous IPCC report. Now we've got the new report out. We don't have the data yet for the new report, but it looks like they narrowed their window a little bit. The most extreme predictions they say are maybe not quite as likely, but the most optimistic are also not as likely. So we're getting a little more specific with this more recent IPCC report, and so we'll be able to rerun these models. But you can pretty clearly see that these fringe areas where we've got a mixture of spruce fir forest, if you've been hiking in our area, you know it starts to transition once you come down from Roan Mountain into a little bit of a mixture of spruce fir and then all deciduous after that. Those are the most vulnerable areas, and those are the areas we would expect to see contraction, and that's what these models indicated as well. We also do event-specific research with other state climatologists. So every state climatologist in all of these states that you see on the map, we're all working together to do a reassessment of the February winter weather event. We didn't really have much of an impact here in East Tennessee. Our temperatures stayed mostly above freezing. We didn't have any snow or ice, but West Tennessee and parts of Middle Tennessee were impacted almost as much as Texas. And Texas got a lot of the attention because of their issues with their power sources. But Tennessee, specifically West Tennessee, had a lot of impacts too. Some areas were breaking records because they had 8 or 9 straight days of temperatures below freezing, which is certainly uncommon. The last time we saw some of those streaks would have been in the 70s or 60s. And so what this type of event reminded us, especially considering mitigation, is that yes, we're in a warming world, but these types of cold snap events are also possible and may or may not also be linked to changes in the climate. And so we've got to really think about planning for these and not ignore these types of events too. And that's one of the big things that we're working on with this research is highlighting the uniqueness of it, especially the uniqueness of it over the past 30 to 40 years. And so let's see, what do we want to do? And so down at the bottom here, I'm not going to go through everything, but I'll go through a few of the things I have highlighted of the things that we want to do. The biggest thing we want to do, and I've kind of hinted at this, is, you know, we're really all about data and climate data services with the Tennessee Climate Office. And so one of the problems in Tennessee right now with understanding rainfall return periods or frequency of severe weather events and those kind of things is we have really poor data quality in Tennessee, on the ground data quality. Of course, there's satellite data and there's lots of other data sets that are out there that are way better than what we used to have. But states like Kentucky and Oklahoma have the 2 best Mesonets in the country. And a Mesonet is a series of research grade weather stations, physical weather stations that are 10 meters high. They have sensors at all different levels that are monitoring all kinds of different things. And they're monitoring them at 5-minute intervals. And so if we have data from a few airport stations across the state, which is what we have now, and they're measuring information hourly, and there's this huge pop-up thunderstorm that comes through over a 30-minute period, we have no idea how short or how long that rainfall event was if it's within that hour. And it really doesn't allow us to understand our return periods for these extreme but very small time period events. And so these types of weather stations can help us understand that. They improve forecasting with the National Weather Service, and they improve stream flow and river forecasting with the River Forecast Center and the Army Corps. And there's all kinds of agricultural benefits to this that Kentucky and Oklahoma and other states that have these systems get to realize. And there are some exciting developments here. We are having a meeting with the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, U.S. Army Corps, TVA, TDEC, and a few other National Weather Service agencies in probably 2 weeks to talk about how to fund this type of system in Tennessee. I don't have many details yet, but I'm excited about the possibility. It seems like some of the infrastructure dollars that are coming out could be used for this. So we'll see. If we have better data, then we can better inform our policymakers and people in industry and researchers about what's going on and what might be changing. There are a number of other tools that other states have created that we think would be very useful for Tennessee. Of course, heat is a big issue, and heat health vulnerability. North Carolina has developed a great tool where they looked at emergency room visits and they compared those for heat stress related illnesses, and they compared those to actual temperatures and heat indices on those days. And so we would like to create a similar tool here in Tennessee to where we better understand what thresholds are getting crossed that may increase ER visits or maybe even mortality from heat. This is part of a tool that North Carolina has now expanded. Actually, their Southeast Regional Climate Center has expanded to Tennessee and Kentucky. We can now look at wet bulb globe temperature, and I won't get into all the details of what that is, but it's a more complex measurement of heat stress than heat index. It's a lot better in understanding how heat affects the body. And so there's a tool now that is available in Tennessee, and we'll have that linked from our website pretty soon. We also have had students work on other projects. This is a student project from about 1.5 years or so ago, where they were bringing in data from the National Digital Forecast Database to create a weather hazard index. And so this is more of a beta product. We haven't released this yet, but it's one we're working on. And then we also, just about a week ago, added a new tab to our website called Climate Data Resources. So we've got a video on there where we go through some of the data sets that we think are most useful to the public. And we just started building this section of our site, so we're gonna add even more to it as time goes on. And one of our big plans before the end of the year is on this same section of the website to have a climate data portal that's specific to Tennessee. So lots of Tennessee climate data, charts, graphs, things that you can interact with and download as graphics. And so that's one of our biggest things we're working on right now. For Tennessee, we also want to develop a report that shows what are some of the changes with these new normals. I don't know if that's something that you guys have talked about very much, but every 10 years, NOAA comes out with a new set of climate normals. And so now we have the 1991 to 2020 climate normals, and you can see that pretty much everywhere there's some level of warming. Here in Tennessee, it's not as extreme compared to the West and the Northeast or Florida. But there's still warming here in Tennessee based on that transition in normals. And you can see that actually looking back at the previous one. So you look at all these climate normals over the 20th century and into the 21st century, and it gets very red more recently. Some of the other things, I won't go through all this. I know I'm running out of time, but we have lots of other things that we're working on either now or planning on working on, have ideas for working with state agencies and others. And then some of our summer activities, we presented to the Climate Literacy for Ag and Sustainable Societies Conference in June. We have a video that we made for educators for the Get Off the Grid Fest in Chattanooga. That's with the Vanderbilt Climate Change Institute. And then just last week, we completed a GIS story mapping and equity mapping project with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy for their Emerging Leaders Youth Summit. Merritt asked me to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this really quickly here at the end. Of course, July was Earth's hottest month ever recorded. But with all things climate, that doesn't happen everywhere. And so if we look at the Southeast and Tennessee specifically, you can see that there were some parts of the globe that were actually below average temperature, and we were in one of those pockets. Now, certainly the northwest of the US was not in one of those pockets. Eastern Europe and eastern parts of Asia were very warm. And so when you average all these out, it was the hottest month on record. But here in kind of the eastern part of the US, much of the eastern part of the US and southern part of the US, we were below average or right at average. And you can see specifically here in Tennessee, when we ran the data set for our monthly climate report, that a lot of areas were below or at average, and a few areas were just above average, but it wasn't as extreme here as we saw in a lot of the rest of the world in July. But you know, climate change is very uneven, and there's very regional and local changes and impacts, and that's what we want to understand better, being the Tennessee Climate Office. And so let me go over here really quick. This is our website. You can actually enter just etsu.edu/tnclimate, and it'll direct you here without the other parts of that website. And there's lots of information on here that you can check out, and we add new stuff all the time. We add our monthly reports about a week or so, or a week or two into the following month. So there are on there and archived all the way back to 2017. We like to highlight different things on our main page. And so back in May, we actually had the first ever Tennessee Climate Data Summit. We had tons of presenters from NOAA, from USGS, from USDA, regional climate centers, other state climate offices. It was an excellent event, and we have it all recorded. And so if you're interested in this event, we have the agenda and reference on here. You can go back and watch different sections. It was a great event to show what are all these resources that are out there and how can I get to them. And so I'd love for you to check that out. And I think with that, I think that's the end of my presentation. So I was wondering if anybody had any questions.
I could not understand which on x-axis had something from 0 to 100%, and I think it was time on y-axis. It was supposed to represent the drought, but I don't understand how it represented the drought. At the very beginning of the, not very, but quite early in the talk. Yeah.
I think you're, let's see.
No, this was color.
Oh, this one, let's see.
It was in color, oh yeah, this one, yes. I don't understand.
Yeah. And so basically over here, the percentage is the percentage of the, in this case, Sevier County, the percentage of the county within each drought level. And so here, let's take this for example, since it's a little easier to discern here. Late 2005, you had every week, each line is for every week. And so by the, looks like the final 3 or 4 weeks, maybe most of December in 2005, you had 100% of Sevier County in at least D0. And you had what looks like within that, you had about 20% for about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks there that were within D1, 20% of the county. So it's the percentage of area of the county.
Okay, but the color tells me, yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the color, I didn't put a legend up there for that one, but the colors are associated with the different drought levels. So you go from nothing, D nada, to D0, D1, D2, D3, D4. Yeah, and so the darker that red.
And D4 is sort of the normal. What is D4?
D4 is an exceptional drought. Let's see if I have another. Let me go back. There was a
exceptional drought.
There you go. Exceptional drought. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so no color is really good. No
That's
color.
right. You want it to be all white. That would be the ideal.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Now, thank you.
Andrew, this is amazing. You talk about a free university. It's like I'm glad we're recording just to watch this again.
Oh, sure.
Because there are many intersections with what we're doing. Is there anybody that has another question? We do have a lot to cover from now on, but William?
I'd just like to say it's great to see such good work being done at our local university. I had a friend who was a chemist who liked to disparage ETSU, but I think it's a really good university.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a lot going on here. Certainly, you know, there's not always news stories about it, so people don't always know. I mean, a lot of people don't even know about the climate office. And so we have tried to be better with interacting with the media so they're aware of what we're doing. And we actually have had a few articles and interviews, but you know, whether they get highlighted or not or go into some Facebook algorithm. You know, we've really tried to get the word out a little better with what we do, because we don't want to be siloed or just in this room that nobody knows about. We want to be public facing. We want people to come here. We want to have trainings and workshops, and we want people to know that you know, there's a lot of things going on at ETSU that's even beyond the climate office that are really good for our university, for our region, and for our state. We think that the climate office has the potential to be a real powerhouse, I think, too, in helping the state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. John, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Andrew, for this great presentation. That you talked about, you know, working with outreach with the media. We find that meteorologists are trusted messengers on climate change. You know, I think we all know the difference between weather and climate here, but do you work at all with local meteorologists anywhere across the state?
Yeah, I don't. So we work with them occasionally as far as like local news stations. Like Ricky Matthews has actually interviewed us, I think 2 times as now. He's with WCYB. And we've had another meteorologist, no longer here. He's in Southwest Virginia, but 3 years ago, we had a student working on the tornadoes impacts project. And he came and interviewed our students. So we make them aware of what we're doing. And sometimes they come and interact with us and interview us and ask us questions. And other times not as much. I would say we interact more directly with the National Weather Service groups, which are of course also meteorologists and forecasters, and they're not quite as public as far as their personalities go, but we work a lot with them because we're both on the data side. We work a lot as far as drought conditions go, because they're providing us data and we're providing them data as well with these monthly reports. So we probably work with the National Weather Service more than the local meteorology personalities, but we do get some interaction with them. And you're right. I mean, that they're the people that the public hears more, and they do trust them. And so I think that's an area where we could do more.
Mm-hmm. Just to give you a heads up, next month, Andrew, a meteorologist from Nashville News Channel 5 who writes on climate change is going to be our presenter. His name is Leland, L-E-L-A-N, Statham, S-T-A-T-O-M. He used to be at CYB, he used to be at Knoxville, but he's pretty famous out there, and he's going to be with us. So maybe there's a way to, you know, for all of us to keep working together, and there are just so many possibilities. So thank you. This is amazing.